Welcome back to Coffee with the Editor here at the Southern African Railways Association's conference and exhibition. I am joined by none other than Howard Rosen, who is the chairman of the Rail Working Group. And if you have been paying attention, you will all know about the Luxembourg Rail Protocol. Howard, thank you so much for joining me.
Pleasure.
So we are making progress.
Firstly, the protocol is now operating. It came into force on the 8th of March this year. It's operating, therefore, in 4 countries already. 3 are in Europe, Sweden, Spain and Luxembourg, but 1 is in Africa, which is Gabon. But South Africa has agreed to ratify. It's gone through Parliament, it's gone through Cabinet, and it's just with the Ministry of External Affairs at the moment for the formalities to actually ratify the protocol. So we expect that to happen in the coming weeks.
Okay.
And then it moves on in South Africa. And South Africa, of course, is a thought leader. It's also very much it has the largest rail network in Africa, of course.
Yeah.
So with South Africa ratifying, we think that will, particularly in Southern Africa, that will start giving more impetus for other countries within Southern Africa to ratify. And we're talking to various countries already, and there's a fair degree of enthusiasm to move forward. So things are beginning to move. And I think one of the great things about the protocol coming to force is that it's functioning. So it means that the international registry is now operating. If you want to go and buy an URVIS number, these unique vehicle identification numbers, you can go to the registry and buy one now, and you know how much it's going to cost. And the model rules on the permanent marking of rolling stock with the URVIS number are also now functioning. So it's no longer a theoretical construct. It's now something that's really happening. Yeah. And people, most importantly, people can see how it works. What they need to do to register themselves, to register the rolling stock, and then gradually it begins to pick up momentum. Yeah. It will take time, of course, and one of the difficulties, but also it's a great opportunity, is the introduction of this unique rail vehicle identification number. Because if you look at all the different assets I can name, from telephones to computers to aircraft to ships to containers, they all have unique vehicle identifiers, or unique identifiers, I should say. But railways have never had that.
No. And
that's an anomaly, which is now being fixed by the protocol. But it will take time for the industry to adapt to that. We hope that manufacturers will gradually just start putting numbers on the side of the wagons in the way set out by the UN. Yes. So that these are permanently affixed to the rolling stock, in the same way as you have with your car. So in your car you have a VIN number yes. on the chassis. So at last in the railway industry we will have the equivalent of a VIN number, which we've never had.
Except, and we can't talk about the VIN number on the engine that's in the locomotive, because that gets changed,
The VIN number on the engine, yes. But the engine is not separately registrable. Yeah. And that was one of the differences between the aircraft and rail protocol. We never foresaw that we would have financing separately on an engine. Oh. But having said that, what is fascinating is that we're now being approached by people who are making components in the rail industry saying, this URVIS number is really a rather interesting idea, because we don't have any system ourselves for uniquely and permanently identifying our components. Oh, wow. So wheelset manufacturers, for example, brake manufacturers, are looking to see, can they use the URVIS number for their own purposes? And the answer is yes. They can't register a security interest at the international registry under the Luxembourg Rail Protocol, because it only applies to the entire item of rolling stock. But that doesn't mean that they can't use the number in terms of financing. And that suddenly gives them the ability to do what we're proposing for the rail industry, which is to go to financiers and ask them to finance based on the collateral and not on the creditworthiness of the debtor. Okay.
So, but there are other things that are coming out of this, other exciting, should we call them spin-offs from it? And do you want to elaborate, or is it too soon?
No, I think there will be spin-offs. Firstly, people have begun to recognise that the Luxembourg Protocol is an important component of PPP projects. Now, that would seem blindingly obvious if you really think about it, but in fact that hasn't been the case in the past. Yes. And we've been working with UNCTAD, for example, in Geneva, to try and incorporate that into their overall thinking and the way that PPPs are looked at and structured in the future to incorporate the benefits of the Luxembourg Protocol. Secondly, with the permanent marking of the railway rolling stock, this is just the first step. And what we're now looking at are digital solutions to see where we can incorporate the way that technology is developing, particularly in terms of tracking the condition, location, and status of the railway rolling stock.
Yes.
Now that brings up its own problems.
Yes.
Security, cybersecurity, who has access to that information, and so on. So those are issues that we're now going to be discussing. In fact, there's a workshop planned on this at the UN in Geneva in 2 weeks' time. But the direction of travel is clear. And for a creditor, most creditors have no idea where their rolling stock is.
No.
And that's important to them, strangely enough. But it's particularly important because if you give people rights under the Luxembourg Protocol to repossess equipment if something goes wrong, if there's, for example, a default or an insolvency, well, repossession is only as good as you knowing where the equipment is. If you don't know where the equipment is, you're in trouble. So this is going to form quite an interesting component of the security package that financiers look at going forward. And this directly impacts the cost of funds. So the banks in particular, but not just the banks, but the banks in particular are required now to allocate capital to loans in accordance with the risk. So the more you lower the risk, the lower the amount of capital, the lower the cost of funds for the bank, the cheaper the money coming out to the customer. So it has a direct impact on the way that the industry is going to work. And that's quite exciting.
And I think it's even more exciting that it's now being seen and recognized. I know you've been on the speaking circuit talking about it for a long time. Yeah. So it's really exciting to see it come to this point and certainly into Africa. Intertrans is coming up. Are you going to be presenting, or is this going to be presented at Intertrans?
Absolutely. Yes, I will be at Intertrans. We're doing a breakfast meeting. Obviously, this is the first Intertrans where the protocol has been in force.
Yes.
So that means that suddenly we're talking to people about something that exists and is functioning, rather than what sometimes people looked at as a theoretical construct. Exactly. So yes, I think it'll be a very busy Intertrans, and we don't have the resources, to be honest, to have our own stand, but obviously we do spend a lot of time with stakeholders in the industry, and as you know from Intertrans, it's huge. So we will never get to everyone, but hopefully we'll get to it.
But there is a big rolling stock manufacturing environment there, and these are companies who are wanting to sell rolling stock. So I think this is the ideal tool.
You would hope so. You would hope so. I think there is a degree of regulatory fatigue with manufacturers, honestly, where they have to do a lot already under regulations. So it will take time for them to get used to another thing that they have to deal with.
Yeah.
But I think in due course, what we expect to happen is that they will just start putting the URVIS numbers on the rolling stock as it comes off the production line, because then it's ready for financing, and you don't have to put your customer through the chaos of having to put numbers on rolling stock that's already running around the system. Yeah. So I think manufacturers will get used to it. It'll take them a bit of time to get used to it, that's all.